They told me we were going for a drive, just to get some air after a long week. Justin said I'd love the view, the kind of sunlight that slips through the redwoods like gold dust. His wife, Lynn, smiled from the passenger seat, too sweet, too calm. I didn't suspect a thing. Why would I? A mother doesn't expect the people she raised to plan her disappearance. I was 74, still walking slow from a broken hip, but not helpless. Not yet. The forest road twisted and climbed until cell service vanished. That should have been my first warning. When the truck stopped, Justin said, "Let's have lunch out here, Mom." He spread a blanket near a fallen pine, and Lynn unpacked sandwiches that smelled of lemon and ham. The air was heavy with heat and silence. Birds rustled somewhere above, pretending not to watch. I remember asking why we'd come so far. Justin just laughed, said, "You'll see." The words meant nothing then, but later they'd echo through my skull like a curse. After we ate, Lynn dusted her hands and said, "We forgot the cooler. It's too heavy. We'll grab it from the car." She was already walking away before I could reply. Justin followed, giving me that practiced smile, the kind children use when they think they're smarter than you. I sat on the log, waiting. The forest buzzed softly around me. Then I heard it, the engine turning over, the crunch of gravel, and the steady hum fading into distance. I waited 10 minutes, then 30. The air changed, quieter, heavier. They weren't coming back. I called their names until my throat burned. The woods didn't care. Even the wind stayed still, as if it didn't want to carry my voice. My phone wasn't in my pocket. My purse was gone, too. They'd taken everything that could call for help. That's when the truth settled in my stomach like ice. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. The picnic, the kindness, the drive, all of it carefully staged. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Shame came first, thick and poisonous. I thought maybe I'd said something wrong that morning. Maybe I'd scolded Lynn too sharply about her cooking or asked Justin about the money he borrowed. But shame turned into something else. Heat, rising from my chest, crawling up my neck until it tasted like metal on my tongue. Anger. A slow, steady kind of anger that burns without sound. The trees stretched in every direction, identical, endless. The sun sat high, mocking me. I told myself to breathe, to think like I used to in my notary office. Calm, precise, logical. But logic doesn't help when the people you love drive away, intending never to return. My legs screamed when I tried to stand, yet I forced it. One hand against the tree bark, one breath at a time. "Okay, Edna," I whispered. One step, then another. The words shook, but they kept me upright. I started counting, trees, steps, seconds, anything to keep my mind from breaking. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe they'd come back. Maybe they'd realize. But as the light shifted and shadows stretched long and cold, hope began to rot. I remembered Justin's recent questions about my life insurance, how he joked about getting things sorted before anything happens. I remembered Lynn's smile when she offered to clean out my car, insisting the trunk was too cluttered. The pieces clicked together like teeth. It wasn't an accident. It was inheritance dressed as affection. By the time the sky began to dim, fear gave way to something stronger, defiance. If they wanted a ghost, they'd have to earn one. I pressed my palm against the dirt, tasting blood on my lip where I'd bitten it raw. "You should have made sure I was dead," I whispered to the trees. The sound barely reached beyond the roots, but it was enough. Somewhere deep inside, a switch flipped. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was surviving. I turned west, toward the faint glow between the trees, the way the sun always falls. My husband used to say, "If you're lost, follow the light. It always leads somewhere." I'd laughed at that once. Now it felt like the only truth left. Every step was agony, but it was mine. Every breath hurt, but it was proof. They thought they'd buried me alive, but they forgot. You can't bury someone who still remembers how to crawl out. And as the forest swallowed me whole, I made a promise that kept me standing. If I survive, they lose everything. The forest is not quiet when you're listening for mercy. Every sound becomes a question, every rustle an answer you don't want to hear. I stood under the burning sky, breath trembling, heart thudding like a hammer in my chest. My son's laughter still echoed somewhere in the back of my mind, not in memory, but as a wound. He had smiled when he left me. That's what I couldn't forget. That smile wasn't love. It was relief. Relief that his problem had finally solved itself. The air was thick and heavy with the scent of pine and dust. I turned slowly, scanning the endless stretch of trees. There was no road, no sound of engines, just the low hum of insects and the dry crack of my heartbeat. My body screamed at me to sit, to rest, to wait. But waiting was what they wanted. I pressed my hand against a nearby tree and pushed forward. The pain hit immediately, sharp, electric, crawling from my hip up my spine. I bit down on my sleeve, refusing to cry out. Crying was for the helpless. I wasn't helpless, not yet. One step, Edna, I whispered. Just one. My voice was thin, but it carried. The ground sloped downward, roots curling like snakes beneath the dirt. Every few feet, I stumbled. Every time I did, I forced myself up again. Time dissolved in the woods. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like days. The sun slid slowly across the sky, taunting me with light that offered no warmth. I tried to remember which direction we had come from, but my mind betrayed me. Images blurred together. The blanket, the smile, the crunch of gravel, the silence. So I made a rule. Follow the light, always west. My husband used to say, if you ever get lost, follow the sun home. I didn't know if it was true, but it was something to believe in. I found a stream by accident, a thin silver line cutting through the soil. The water was cold, cruelly cold, but alive. I fell to my knees and cupped it in my hands, drinking greedily. It tasted like dirt and salvation. I splashed some on my face, and for the first time since the car disappeared, I breathed without shaking. I wasn't safe, not even close, but I was alive. I sat there for a long moment, letting my breath find its rhythm again. That's when I saw something half buried near the edge of the water, a candy wrapper, purple and shiny. It shouldn't have meant anything, but to me it was proof. People had been here. Civilization wasn't gone. Maybe if I could follow the stream, I'd find where that person came from. I forced myself to stand again. The trees swayed above like they were whispering secrets. Each step was slower now, more deliberate. My leg burned, my throat ached, and my fingers were bleeding from where the bark had stripped my skin. I stopped counting steps. Counting was for people who thought they might reach the end. I was still somewhere in the middle, somewhere between death and defiance. When the light began to fade, I searched for shelter. My body was done pretending to be strong. I spotted a hollow beneath an old pine, low and dark. It wasn't safety, but it was a pause. I crawled inside, using my sweatshirt as a blanket, pulling the smell of earth around me like armor. The night came down fast. The forest changed then. The warmth died, the insects vanished, and something deeper took over. The kind of silence that watches you breathe. I couldn't sleep. My body refused. I stared into the dark until my eyes invented shapes, faces, movement, ghosts. Somewhere far off, an owl screamed. I didn't flinch. I'd already met the worst kind of predator that morning, and he'd called me Mom. Hours passed. The cold gnawed at my bones, turning my fingers stiff and white. But I didn't close my eyes. I kept whispering the same thing over and over, a promise only I could hear. If I survive, they lose. If I crawl out of here, I take it all back. Each word felt like blood in my mouth, bitter but alive. When dawn finally arrived, it wasn't beautiful. It was gray and cruel and honest. But the light touched my face, and that was enough. I was still here. They had taken my money, my trust, my name, but not my will. I pushed myself up, bones aching, eyes burning, and faced the endless forest again. They thought the woods would finish what they started. They were wrong. The woods had just given me something they never could, a reason to fight. And as I limped forward into the new day, one truth grew louder than the ache in my body. They had left me to die for the insurance money. Now I would live to collect it back. Night has a way of changing everything. The same forest that looked alive under the sun now felt like the mouth of something ancient and hungry. The air was colder than it had any right to be. My sweatshirt, thin and damp with sweat, clung to my back like a warning. I pressed myself against the trunk of a tree and tried to quiet my breathing. Every sound became sharper in the dark. The snap of a branch, the whisper of wind, the low, distant cry of something I didn't want to name. Fear was supposed to come first, but it didn't. What came was exhaustion, the kind that reaches past your body and into your bones. I sank onto the roots, curling into myself, trying to remember the last time I had felt safe. I thought of my husband, Tom. He used to say that the woods were honest. No lies, no faces, no masks. I almost laughed at that. These trees were watching me now, silent witnesses to what my family had done. Honest or not, they didn't care. I should have cried, but I didn't. Tears were for those who still believed in comfort. I was too empty for that. The shame I'd felt earlier had burned away, replaced by something colder, awareness. It was like standing outside myself, looking down at the old woman they'd left behind. A weak, disposable thing. No, that wasn't who I was. I had spent 74 years surviving life, disappointment, death, and love that turned into silence. I could survive this too. The pain in my hip throbbed like a heartbeat. I tore a strip from my sleeve and wrapped it tight. It didn't help much, but it gave me something to do. Something human. I needed that. The stars flickered through the canopy, thin and far away. I whispered to them like I used to whisper prayers when I still believed anyone was listening. Not yet, I said. Not like this. Sometime in the night, the cold became unbearable. My fingers stopped feeling like mine. I needed shelter. I needed anything that felt like a wall between me and the dark. I pushed myself up and limped forward, each step a small betrayal of my body. The moonlight painted everything silver, the ground, the branches, even the scratches on my hands. Then I saw it, a shadow that didn't move with the trees, a shape that didn't belong. It was a cabin, or what was left of one. The roof sagged, the door hung sideways, and the smell of rot reached me before I even touched it. Still, it was a roof. I crawled inside. The floor groaned, but it held. There was an old metal cot in the corner, a pile of leaves where a blanket should have been. I sat down, bones trembling, breath ragged. On the floor, an empty tin can caught the faint moonlight. Someone had been here once. Maybe years ago, maybe months. It didn't matter. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. The silence here was different, thicker, heavier. I let the memories in because there was nothing left to block them. Justin asking for money, just until payday. Lynn's voice, honey-sweet and sharp underneath. You don't need to worry about bills anymore, Mom. We'll handle it. I'd believed them. I'd signed where they told me to sign. Power of attorney, life insurance, trust fund. Love wrapped in paperwork. And now that paperwork was worth more than my pulse. The realization hurt worse than my leg. They hadn't done this because they hated me. They'd done it because they'd stopped seeing me as a person. I was just a signature. Just a number. A problem to solve. Something in me broke then, not from pain but from clarity. I sat up straighter, the rusted cot creaking beneath me. "You should have made sure I was dead," I whispered into the dark. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It was lower, steadier. The voice of someone who'd already decided what came next. I lay back and stared through the hole in the roof. The stars watched in silence. My body ached, my eyes burned, but my mind was alive again. I thought about everything they'd taken, everything I'd given, and everything I could still take back. If I survived the night, I wouldn't crawl home for mercy. I'd walk back for justice. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning, or maybe an anthem. I pulled the filthy blanket over my chest and smiled into the dark. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow I crawl if I have to. But tomorrow, I begin to take it all back." When the morning came, it didn't feel like salvation. It felt like defiance. The light slipped through the cracks in the broken roof, painting the walls in thin stripes of gold and dust. My body ached in every possible way, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Hunger had stripped away the weakness. Pain had burned off the fear. All that was left now was one thought: go home. Not to forgive. Not to forget. To reclaim. I pushed myself upright, one shaky movement at a time. My right leg screamed in protest, but I ignored it. The old metal cot groaned as I used it to stand. I found a rusted piece of its frame and snapped it loose, a poor excuse for a cane, but enough to keep me moving. I stepped outside. The air was thick with morning mist and the smell of wet earth. Every breath stung my lungs, but that pain was proof that I was still alive when they wanted me gone. The forest looked different in the daylight. The trees weren't towering monsters anymore. They were silent witnesses. My shoes were torn, one lace missing, but I walked anyway. I followed the same stream that had kept me alive the day before, its gentle sound like a heartbeat leading me forward. The water twisted between the roots, sparkling with pieces of sky. I bent to drink, then kept going, west, always west. Hours passed. My pace slowed, but my will didn't. I found wild berries tangled in a bush, small, dark, and bitter. I ate them greedily, the sweetness like a memory of life itself. Thorns tore at my hands, but I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to. My husband used to say, "If you want to live, don't look back." I didn't. I couldn't bear to see how far I'd already fallen. The slope ahead was steep, covered in mud and loose rock. I tried to go around it, but my path narrowed. One wrong step and the ground gave way. I fell hard, rolling, my shoulder hitting a stone that sent lightning through my bones. Dirt filled my mouth. The world spun. I lay there for a while, gasping, waiting for the sky to stop moving. Then I heard it, faint, distant, unreal, a sound that didn't belong to the woods. Engines. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But no, it came again, low and steady, like thunder from far away. I turned my head toward the sound, crawling through the leaves, dragging my useless leg behind me. Every inch hurt. Every breath was a battle. But pain meant movement, and movement meant life. I crawled until I saw it, a flash of gray through the trees. Metal. A road. When I reached the edge, I didn't recognize myself. My hands were caked with blood and dirt. My clothes hung in rags. But the road was real, cracked, narrow, but solid. Civilization. I laughed, or maybe cried. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. The noise startled a crow from the guardrail. It flew off, black wings slicing the morning. I pulled myself onto the asphalt, pressing my cheek against it. It was warm. Alive. I'd made it. For the first time since that terrible morning, I let my body collapse completely. The world blurred into color and sound. Then, another hum. Louder this time. I forced my head up. A truck was coming around the bend. I waved weakly, my arm heavy as stone. The truck slowed, then stopped. A man jumped out, mid-40s, sunburned face, eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. "Jesus, lady," he said, kneeling beside me. "Are you okay?" My throat was too dry to answer. I managed one word. "Town." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Let's get you out of here." He helped me into the passenger seat. The cab smelled of gasoline and coffee. He handed me a plastic bottle of water. I drank until it was gone, my hands shaking. "What happened?" he asked as he started driving. I looked out the window at the fading forest, at the road stretching toward the life I'd lost. "Something like a misunderstanding," I said softly. "You got family around here?" I almost smiled. "Not anymore." He didn't ask again. Sometimes silence is kinder than pity. When the first buildings appeared, a gas station, a diner, the faint outline of town, I felt a strange pull in my chest. It wasn't relief. It was clarity. I wasn't done suffering. I was done being lost. "Drop me near Mill Avenue," I told him. "I can walk from there." He looked concerned. "You sure?" "I've been walking a long time," I said. He left me at the old gas station. The sign was faded, the same one we'd passed before they took me in. I stood there on trembling legs, watching his truck drive away. The town looked exactly the same. Cars passing, people laughing, life going on. The world hadn't noticed I was gone. I didn't go home. Not yet. Home wasn't safe. Not while they still believed I was dead. I needed time. I needed to think. A few blocks down stood the Golden Pine Motel, its neon sign flickering through the morning haze. It looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. I walked in, dirt still streaking my face. The man at the desk didn't recognize me, and that was good. "One night," I said. "Cash." He slid me a key without questions. Room 7. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From realization. They thought they had buried me, but they'd only given me reason to rise. I opened the motel drawer, found a notepad and a stub of a pencil, and began to write. Not a letter. A list. Everything I'd given them. Every signature they'd stolen. Every promise they'd broken. By the time I was done, the paper was full. I folded it neatly, placed it under my pillow, and whispered to the room, to the air, to myself. Tomorrow, they'll learn the dead don't stay buried. Morning found me sitting on the edge of the motel bed, the notepad still open, the list staring back like a mirror of everything I'd lost. $42,000 for Justin's business dream. The house, still in my name but controlled by them. The car I'd stopped driving when Lynn offered to take care of the errands. My insurance, the one they'd quietly updated 6 months ago. Each line felt like a small funeral, every signature I'd given, a shovel of dirt over my own life. The old clock above the television ticked loud enough to keep me awake. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. When you've been buried alive, even breathing feels like rebellion. At 9 sharp, I stood in front of the bank. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Inside, the air smelled of paper, ink, and old carpet cleaner. People moved slowly, politely. None of them knew a ghost had walked in. "Good morning, ma'am," the teller smiled. "Richard Duncan," I said. "My account manager. Tell him Edna Howell is here." She froze for a fraction of a second. My name must have sounded like one spoken at a gravesite. 5 minutes later, Richard came out. Clipboard in hand, coffee cup half raised, his face drained of color. "Mrs. Howell, my God. I'm alive," I said. "And I want to review my accounts." He stammered. "Your son," he said. I know what he said. Show me my accounts, Richard. All of them. He obeyed. For the next hour, I sat in that small glass office while he pulled up records, scrolling through transactions I'd never made. Transfers, consolidations, withdrawals. Small enough not to raise alarms, steady enough to drain a life. My life. By noon, I'd frozen everything. Every joint account, every auto payment, every access code. By 12:30, the power of attorney was revoked. By 1, I had a lawyer on the line. Not Tom's old friend, the kind man who used to handle wills. No. I needed someone sharper. Someone who could cut through lies like thread. Her name was Ms. Pierce. She spoke with the kind of calm that hides knives. I want my estate restored, I told her. She listened quietly, then said, And your family? Let the law handle them, I replied. I'll handle everything else. That night, the motel walls were too quiet. The TV flickered on the local news, and the headline made my heart still. Community mourns elderly woman presumed dead in forest accident. My picture. My house. My son standing on the porch, chin low, eyes red. Beside him, Lynn, dressed in black, mascara streaked perfectly. Her hand rested on his shoulder like she was holding the world together. I turned the volume up. They were good to me, a neighbor said. Always so caring with Edna. It's tragic. Tragic. Yes, tragic that the devil wears a pressed suit and calls you mom. The camera panned over the front yard. Balloons. Candles. A banner strung across the porch, in loving memory of Edna Howell. I smiled then, not bitterly, softly, almost kindly. Let them cry. Let them pretend. Let them believe they'd won. Because tomorrow, their ghost would come home. The next morning, I met Ms. Pierce in person. She was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s maybe, with steel-gray eyes that didn't waste time on sympathy. She listened while I told her everything. The woods, the silence, the insurance. When I finished, she nodded once. You have evidence, she said. I have scars, I replied. Those will do. We spent the day at the courthouse, filing documents, signing reversals, locking doors they didn't even know I'd opened. When it was done, Ms. Pierce looked at me. You understand what this means? I nodded. It means when they wake up tomorrow, everything they own will belong to the woman they tried to bury. That night, I didn't return to the motel right away. I stood across the street from my house, hidden beneath the oak tree. The porch lights were glowing, soft and gold. Cars lined the street. People laughed inside. My people. Through the window, I saw Lynn smiling as she poured wine. Justin stood near the fireplace, practicing his grief in the reflection of the glass. I watched them for a long time. Not with rage. With clarity. They weren't my family anymore. They were strangers who'd mistaken kindness for weakness. When the laughter grew louder, I turned and walked away. The night air was cool on my face, the stars high and distant. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow they'll see what happens when the dead stop staying dead. I always thought that if I ever walked into a courtroom, it would be as a witness for someone else's pain, not the proof that I'd survived my own murder. Yet there I was, standing at the door of courtroom 3B, my heart slow, my hand steady. The badge on the officer's chest glinted under the fluorescent lights as he opened the door. Mrs. Howell, he said quietly, they're ready for you. Inside, the air smelled of polish, paper, and fear. At one table sat my lawyer, Ms. Pierce, calm as stone. At the other, Justin and Lynn, my son and his perfect wife. The room was silent until my footsteps broke it. Justin turned first. The look on his face wasn't shock. It was horror. Real, raw horror. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Lynn didn't turn right away. She stayed frozen, staring straight ahead, as if moving would make me real. The judge adjusted her glasses. This hearing concerns the verification of identity for Mrs. Edna Howell, presumed deceased, in relation to property and insurance claims filed by third parties. Her eyes lifted. Is the petitioner present? I am, I said. Justin's mouth opened, then closed. Your Honor, this is insane. She's alive, I finished. My voice didn't tremble. Very much alive. Lynn finally turned. Her face drained of color. She had painted grief so beautifully at my memorial, but she couldn't fake this. Fear looks different. It doesn't sit neatly behind mascara. It crawls through the eyes and into the voice. The judge's gavel tapped once. We will begin by confirming your identity. I handed over my documents, birth certificate, social security card, expired driver's license. Ms. Pierce laid down the medical records from the clinic, the police report, the photographs of my bruises and cuts. Every mark on my skin became evidence, every scar a sentence. The judge reviewed everything carefully, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Howell, she said finally, the court recognizes you as legally alive and in full control of your estate, effective immediately. All property and financial rights revert to you. Ms. Pierce nodded, professional as ever. We will proceed with restoring ownership of the Laurel Street home and reversing unauthorized transfers. It was over in less than 15 minutes. No shouting, no tears, no fireworks, just the soft sound of justice landing where it should have the first time. Justin stood abruptly, his voice low, desperate. Mom, please, what are you doing? I looked at him, really looked. The little boy who used to chase fireflies in our backyard was long gone. All that was left was a man who had traded love for profit. I'm coming home, I said. Lynn gripped his arm, whispering through clenched teeth, Don't. But I wasn't talking to her anymore. Your Honor, I said calmly, I request a sheriff's escort for my return to the property. Granted, the judge replied. That afternoon, we drove down Laurel Street. A sheriff's car led the way, lights flashing softly. The neighbors peeked through curtains, pretending not to stare. My hands rested on the manila folder in my lap, the official order, the proof that ghosts can, in fact, reclaim the world of the living. When the car stopped in front of my house, I didn't move at first. I just looked. My name was still on the mailbox. E. Howell. The banner from the memorial was gone, but I could still see the faint outline where the tape had been. The deputy stepped out first, followed by Ms. Pierce. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. We walked up the path together. The air was heavy, the kind that comes before rain. The deputy knocked on the door. Sheriff's office, he said. Formal notice of return and transfer enforcement. Footsteps shuffled inside. Then the door opened. Lynn stood there in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair tied high, eyes hollow. She looked right through me. What is this? She demanded. Ms. Pierce handed her the document. Court order. You've been evicted under emergency reversal of property transfer. The legal owner has returned. Lynn scoffed. You mean her? Yes, Ms. Pierce said evenly. Her. Justin appeared behind her, unshaven, wearing the jacket I'd given him for his last birthday. This is unnecessary, he said. We're appealing. The deputy raised a hand. Sir, you've had 72 hours to vacate. This is not a discussion. He looked at me, eyes hollow, the confidence gone. You're ruining everything. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of calm that comes from surviving the impossible. No, Justin, I said. I'm fixing it. They slammed the door. The deputy waited. I didn't move. They'll pack, Ms. Pierce said quietly. Let them. While the house filled with the muffled chaos of boxes and whispers, I looked at my garden. The the lilac bush, dry and neglected. I thought of all the years I'd watered it with patience and hope, the same way I'd nurtured the people now inside. And just like the plant, they'd taken and taken until there was nothing left. 20 minutes later, the door opened again. Lynn went first, carrying a single duffel bag. She didn't look at me. Justin followed, head down, suitcase dragging behind him. He stopped halfway down the porch steps. "You could have talked to me," he said. "I did," I replied. "You stopped listening." He hesitated, searching for a version of me he could still manipulate. He didn't find her. They got in their car and drove away. The deputy confirmed their departure, signed a form, and left. Ms. Pierce lingered a moment longer. "Do you want to go inside?" she asked. I nodded. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The air inside smelled like strangers, candles, perfume, false comfort. The walls were painted pale gray, Lynn's favorite color. But beneath it, the house was still mine. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, the walls, the memories. Every step felt like reclaiming a heartbeat. When Ms. Pierce finally left, I made tea in a dented saucepan, no kettle left, of course. I stood by the window, sipping slowly, watching the lilac bush sway in the rain. They thought they'd buried me in those woods. They forgot. I knew how to dig. For the first time in months, the house was silent, not with grief, but with peace. The kind of peace that feels like oxygen after years of breathing smoke. The curtains swayed gently with the breeze. Rain tapped on the glass, and the smell of lilacs drifted in through the cracks. I stood there, one hand on the windowsill, watching the world I'd built, and almost lost, bloom again. The papers were done, the accounts restored, the insurance reclaimed. Justin and Lynn were gone. The law had done its part, but justice is quieter. It doesn't shout. It just sits in the corner of your heart, whispering, "You made it back." Days turned into weeks. I fixed the things they'd broken, the crooked gate, the leaky faucet, the wilted plants. Every small repair felt like taking another piece of myself back. The house wasn't just mine again, it was alive again. One afternoon, I heard a car door close outside. For a second, my chest tightened. Fear is a habit that doesn't fade easily. But when I opened the door, it wasn't them. It was her. Maggie. My granddaughter. She stood on the porch, holding a small bouquet of lilacs, her eyes wide with shock and tears. "Grandma." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she dropped the flowers and ran into my arms. The smell of rain and her hair, the warmth of her heartbeat, I hadn't realized how much I missed the simple weight of love. She pulled back just enough to look at me. "They said you were gone," she whispered. "I was," I said softly. "But not anymore." We sat together on the couch, just like old times. She told me everything, how she'd questioned the story, how something never felt right, how she'd gone looking through old documents herself. Turns out, the truth runs in our bloodline, it just skips a generation sometimes. When she left that evening, she promised to come back tomorrow, to help, to stay, to make up for lost time. And for the first time since that day in the woods, I believed in tomorrow. I walked her to the gate and watched her drive off, her tail lights glowing red in the drizzle. I turned back toward the house, my house, and smiled. They had taken my trust, my money, my name. But I took back something far greater, my freedom. I picked one lilac from the bush and placed it on the kitchen table. "We made it," I whispered to the empty room. "We really made it." Then I looked straight at the camera that had been recording my story, the one I set up that morning, because the world deserves to know what betrayal looks like and what survival sounds like. My voice steady, I said, "If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you love, remember this. You can be buried, forgotten, left for dead, but you are not finished until you decide you are. People will count you out the moment you stop fighting. Don't let them. Because the truth is, surviving isn't revenge. It's justice." I paused, letting the silence breathe. Then I smiled and added, if this story touched your heart, hit like to show that truth always wins. Comment, justice, if you believe no one deserves to be forgotten. And subscribe, because tomorrow's story will remind you that even in darkness, there's always a way back to the light. The rain kept falling softly as the camera light turned off. The house hummed with quiet, the kind that only comes when every piece of your soul is finally where it belongs. And outside, the lilacs, the ones they'd forgotten, bloomed brighter than ever.